Hello everyone, Phoenix Knight here. Welcome to the channel, and welcome to Pinot with Phoenix for December 2024. I see Jester stopping by. Apologies for letting this stream as starting screen run a little bit longer than usual. The connection was initially very unstable, but it seems like it's settled down now, so we are set for what I'm expecting to be a long episode of Pinot with Phoenix. So rather than kind of come up with any kind of special intro, what say we just jump right into it? So the first game that we played for the month was, of course, the start of Christmas in Arkham, as we played Eldritch Horror. Now, after the Fate of the Elder Gods tournament, we were up against Yog-Sothoth for Christmas in Arkham. Unfortunately, Yog-Sothoth managed to take that one pretty easily, 1-0. But that wasn't even the worst blow he inflicted on us to start Christmas in Arkham. The worst blow he inflicted was taking Agnes out right away. Because the problem was, we had big problems, we were going to have big problems going into 2nd edition without Agnes. Because the problem for Yog-Sothoth in 2nd edition, and before we go too much further, I will apologize for the buzzing. My water bubbler is making loud noises, but it seems like it's behaving as usual. But the reason losing Agnes was such a huge blow for us going into 2nd edition is because Yog-Sothoth actually modifies, when Yog-Sothoth is the Ancient One for that game, Yog-Sothoth modifies the game by increasing the difficulty to close gates by 1. So whereas normally you just need 1 success to close a gate, you actually need 2 against Yog-Sothoth. And Agnes, we were going to be relying... Yeah, Christmas in Arkham was a disaster for the heroes, and we're starting to recount how it all started, how the disaster all started, and why losing Agnes was such a big blow going into 2nd edition. So as I mentioned, losing Agnes meant we lost a 6th lore character who was primarily going to be our gate closer in 2nd edition. So because we didn't have her available, we kind of had to patch a different team together. But welcome back to Christmas in Arkham. We are far from done talking about Christmas in Arkham. Next up, we went down to the seas in World War II Atlantic as we played The Hunters by GMT. Actually, my copy is by Consim Press, but the game by GMT will be the exact same game. This one puts you in charge of a German U-boat prowling the seas of the Atlantic. We had to start a new career because our last commander, Zimmer, actually got sunk. But we send out Schultz in command of a new German U-boat, U-26. We actually managed to sink the Audacity on one of our first patrols, and we started off with over 30,000 tons of shipping. I really like the narrative that it goes for, and a lot of the things in there are actually abstracted very well, where you don't have to worry about the actual subs going through. You don't have to worry about the subs, you don't have to worry about torpedo trajectories, you don't have to worry about any of that. I just like being able to focus in and essentially start telling a story around the skipper you have coming out. So that's a slight ramble on the Hunters. Before we jump into the next game, let's go ahead and make this a kind of a chill stream, since it's also going to have an end of the year report to it, where we'll also make this an AMA. We'll make this an AMA stream as well. So if there's something you want to ask for AMA, go ahead and leave it with an AMA tag, so I'll know to come back to that at some point, and it's not just part of the banter. But let's use the regular AMA rules. And Jester, yes, Hunters is a nice quality game. Jester, I'm going to trust you on the moderating for that. We'll use the standard AMA rules. Basically, don't ask anything too personal and just use a little bit of common sense. If you don't want a question asked of you, don't ask it of me. And I'll kind of keep an eye on chat, but I'll probably leave most of that to you, Jester. So we'll go ahead and jump into our next game after talking about the Hunters. As next up, we played the first, but hardly our last RPG for the month, as we played Star Wars Force and Destiny by Edge Studios. This is Star Wars Force and Destiny is part of the Star Wars role-playing game that Fantasy Flight put out years ago that Edge Studio has revamped. There are 3 games in this world. There's Star Wars Age of Rebellion for the Rebel heroes Then there's a Edge of the Empire for the scoundrels, like your Han Solos, your Chewies, your bounty hunters as well. Force and Destiny is the one I picked, though, because Force and Destiny focuses on the Force-sensitive stories in that world. And the main reason I picked that one up over the others is because back when I played Star Wars The Old Republic, back in 2013-14, I really enjoyed the Force-sensitive stories, especially the Sith stories, with the Sith Inquisitor and the Sith Warrior. So that's why when I got into the RPG, I picked up Star Wars Force and Destiny. We took out two of the pre-made heroes in Kaveri and Dao, starting an initial encounter with the Gatekeeper. We did manage to defeat Malefax in that to complete the initial game in the beginner game. And I really enjoy the narrative with the dice, where you don't just roll to get the number result. Even the dice can be part of telling a story, because what they have is you've got your success and failures on 2 opposing dice. Then there's what's known as advantage and threat. So as those results all cancel out, you can piece together a narrative to say, okay, maybe I got what I was looking for, but I had some kind of a penalty with it. Or I didn't get what I was looking for, but I found something else. So you can essentially it's like succeed with a penalty or fail with a potential bonus. For example, if you succeed on the roll, but you get a bunch of threat, say, okay, you found what, like, for example, if you're slicing a computer, you might look at that, you might look at a roll where you succeed, but you get a lot of threats to say, okay, I found what I was looking for, but I tripped off some kind of alarm of some kind, so now security is coming down after me. Or in the inverse, take the same example where we're trying to slice into a computer system, we fail, but there are a lot of advantages to that, so we might interpret that to mean, okay, we failed to find what we were actually looking for, but we went down a side path to find, say, this different piece of information. Maybe we find a more dangerous threat out somewhere else, and instead of following whatever threat we were continuing there, maybe we go investigate that threat. So let's say on Tatooine, for instance, we're trying to slice into a computer terminal, and we don't find what we're looking for, but we realize, oh, there's like a Death Star or a battle station or something moving to destroy this other planet. Maybe we either go to the other planet to try to get people off, depending on the distance, or we go try to destroy the battle station. So there's a very heavy narrative focus with Star Wars Force and Destiny that I really like. And we'll probably be seeing more of that on the channel. But let's move into our next game as we played Silent Victory, also by Constant Press and GMT Games. The simplest way I would say to describe Silent Victory is basically US the Hunters. That's probably the best way to do that. The one thing that's going to drive you nuts in Silent Victory is dud rolls very early on. We had a lot of duds on that first patrol in Silent Victory. We took Lieutenant Commander Leonard out for a few patrols. We managed to sink 2 ships to start his career to give him a somewhat decent start. The shipping total was not a whole lot, I don't think. I want to say it was like maybe 4,000 or 5,000 tons. But at least we managed to sink something coming out of that. So a lot of what I can say for the Hunters, I can also say about Silent Victory. It's essentially your U.S. subs, but you're patrolling in the World War II Pacific rather than the Atlantic. You're going after Japanese shipping instead of British shipping, since you're in control of a German U-boat in the Hunters. So if you like the Hunters, odds are you'll probably like some of the other games in the series, like Silent Victory, or some of the other stuff that Gregory Smith does. Speaking of which, that's our next game. That's actually a segue into our next game as we played Defending America, intercepting the America bombers. This one's by Compass Games, and it sets you in an alternate timeline of World War II in Europe, where the Germans have won the war in Europe, and now they've got a forward base in the Azores under pressure from Portugal, trying to go after the United States mainland. But they need even from the Azores, they need a long-range bomber to go after the American mainland. Enter the America bomber, and that's actually spelled Amerika. So I'll put in the spelling for that in chat. So that's the spelling on the America bombers that they use. In this one, you're on the U.S. side of the war, trying to intercept the America bombers. We had to bring a new pilot in since our last pilot got shot down. We brought S.H.I.E.L.D. in for this one. We went on 3 sorties, but we had nothing happening there. So we got to the end of the month, and now we're researching improved fuel tanks, which will theoretically make our fuel tanks stronger. So that's it for Defending America. Next up, we actually got a flipping right, I should say, as we played Welcome To by Blue Dog Games. Welcome To is a very simple city builder where you're building up a city and adding pools, parks, and other various features to it. We went through a playthrough of building in Madison, essentially a 1950s version of Madison. You can name whatever city you want. I managed to score 101 points in playing that game. Normally I don't score that high. Usually I score in mid-70s to low 80s. So actually we did very well on that one. A normal playthrough is very quick. But because I slowed this down a little bit, and I was doing a play-along anyway, and there was definitely teaching to it. I actually played it a little bit more slowly than I usually do. But again, that's because I was teaching that. Our next game was actually a replay. Was actually kind of a series replay as we did Stratomatic Hockey. This is I'm getting a little bit spoilerific, but Stratomatic Hockey, like you can probably guess, hockey simulator. For this one, we replayed the 2017-18 Stanley Cup Finals, just to figure out once and for all what I think, A, of tabletop hockey in general, and B, of Strat Hockey in particular. So, Welcome To will be a game that you play in 2025 because of my playthrough. Glad to hear you're going to get that on the channel. It's actually a very simple game to go through. So, and if you need me to do another playthrough beforehand, let me know and I'll try to work it in with everything else I've got going on, but no promises on when I'll be able to get to that. So, as I said, we did with Strat Hockey. We did a replay of the 2017-18 Stanley Cup Finals, which Vegas actually won in 7 games. Historically, the Washington Capitals won the Stanley Cup that year in 5 games. And I really enjoyed Strat. It actually by far played the quickest out of the hockey games I've got. I've also got Appa Hockey, Inside the Crease Hockey, and Hockey Blast. Which Hockey Blast is another quick playing game, but it's a very different setup, and I'm not completely sure about that one. But as a play-by-play game, I do like Strat. It's got a flow that I really like to it. So we'll probably be seeing more of that on the channel. I did also play an exhibition game out of the 2000-2001 season, which I added a ticker test with that using Ultra Quick Hockey. I think it was Final Score Hockey by Downey Games. That test seemed to go pretty well, so I may add that in as a season replay of that in the future. But Hockey Replay was pretty good. Might jump and do one in 2025. I haven't decided if I'm going to do one yet either. We'll see what I think after I get through my next big sports project coming up. But that's it for Strat Hockey. Next up, we did play Sentinels of the Multiverse. For this is a comic superhero based game by Greater Than Games. Jester does a lot with Sentinels of the Multiverse on his channel. In this playthrough, we took one of my main teams of Wraith, Fanatic, Night Mist, and Absolute Zero. We had them take on Ambuscade at the Temple of Zulong. Things were looking a little bit dicey early on in this game, but we managed to take control of this, and I do still really enjoy this game. I like that it's got a pre-built deck. It's good that it's got a pre-built deck to it, so it serves as a good introductory point. But there's also something to be said for Marvel Champions, which we'll talk about later, which has got its own deck building. I actually stopped by Jester's channel and played this with him in the month as well, and we actually won that game. I forget who we were taking on, but we went through that one pretty easily, especially when we got a few of our heroes online and were able to keep the villain ongoings under control. Unlike against Ambuscade, where things were a little bit dicey, but again, really enjoy that game. Need to get it out a little bit more. But that's it for Sentinels of the Multiverse. Next up, let's move back to the Cthulhu mythos as we played the Cards of Cthulhu by DVG. The Cards of Cthulhu has you trying to keep 4 ancient ones at bay: Yog-Sothoth, Cthulhu, Chognar-Fogan, and Arwasa. We actually managed to keep the board under control very easily, and we won that game. It seems like one where it cascades either way, where if things are getting out of control, it'll usually cascade pretty quickly, whereas if things are in control, you'll usually be able to hold control of that pretty well, at least in my experience. And I might add the expansion to my next replay. The expansion adds several new cards, and it also adds Nyarlathotep to the mix. So the next time I get this game out, I may pull that out. Next game we played was actually also ended up being my last game stream for 2024, as we played Mag 23 Guadalcanal by Historic Wings. This one dumps you into control of a squadron of the Cactus Air Force in Guadalcanal. Cards of Cthulhu is a long game, and to win is super hard, so I did really well. Yeah, my first couple playthroughs were pretty dicey of the Cards of Cthulhu, but yeah, I managed to pull that one off. Coming back to Mag 23 Guadalcanal, we actually pulled this out 3 different times. The first time we pulled this out, we had a win on a day with 2 missions. We had a sea mission where we left a cruiser burning, and then we had an epic air mission the Japanese were intending as a knockout blow. Wow, I'm combining words and just not making any sense. That was a win on the day. Second time we ended up taking a loss on the chin because the runway was a cratered mess and I didn't want to fly into that. We managed to avert a runway disaster on that one. And then the third time that we took it out, which was earlier today, we actually had another foggy start to the day where it was looking like we were going to eat yet another loss on the day. But we actually managed to get up for a sea mission in tolerable weather, and we managed to sink a destroyer in that for a much-needed win, but the runway is once again a mess, which might keep us grounded. We will see how that goes when I get that back to the channel, though. I really enjoy the narrative coming out of Mag 23 Guadalcanal. And it's one of those games where the narrative just pops out at me almost like nothing. And I've got some stories that I'm already working on, like the story of Shadow kind of advancing through the ranks, or stories of changing COs. And like I said, a lot of that is just where the narrative pops out very easily at me. So we'll definitely be seeing a lot more of Guadalcanal on the channel. Next up, we went to a space deck builder as we played Astronauts by Indie Boards and Cards. If you've played Aeon's End, which we'll be talking about later, you'll notice a lot familiar about Astronauts. For this one, we had an exhibition game as we took Zach and Christina out versus Architect O-815. It was also looking dicey in that one, but I managed to pull that one out in the end. I do really enjoy that game. Again, I enjoy Aeon's End, and there's a lot similar to in Astronauts, so that's a game we're going to be seeing a lot more of on the channel. And Mag 23 Guadalcanal is going to be another game Jester plays in 2025. So, very cool on that. Speaking of Historic Wings, though, we actually went into his Battle of Britain game as well, as we played Tally Ho. As I mentioned, this one puts you in control of a British squadron, as you're taking on the German Luftwaffe in the Battle of Britain. We went through mission 2 of our playthrough, and the Germans actually beat the high holy hell out of our convoys, so we ended up eating a loss on the mission. I'll talk a little bit more about what I think of some of the Battle of Britain games in my collection, but Tally-Ho is probably one that's going to get to the channel again. So, looking forward to seeing more of that. And speaking of Aeon's End, we actually did play Aeon's End as well. This is the original game from Indie Boards and Cards, where you're in control of Breach Mages defending Gravehold from the Nameless. I took Nyrisia and Solidia, my 2 Magi that I built in Aeon's End Legacy, out for a playthrough against Bladius. I took them out with the advanced rules for Bladius earlier this year, but we actually had Bladius escape from us. So we played on normal this time. We managed to take care of business, and I do really enjoy Aeon's End. I slowed it down a little bit, though, because Conflict Board Gaming was by and he wanted to learn how to play the game. So rather than kind of fly through Aeon's End like I normally would, I slowed it down and I did more of a teaching playthrough. So if you really want to see how Aeon's End plays, as I'm explaining it nice and slowly, that'll be a good video for you to check out. So that's it for Aeon's End. Aeon's End is a great game and plays great solo. The amount of different heroes and villains is great. Yeah, that's one thing I really like about Aeon's End, where there's a wide variety of not only heroes, but villains you can take out. And as I mentioned, if you go play through Aeon's End Legacy, the Magi you get coming out of that, you can use in your other games of Aeon's End, your other standalone games. So we have definitely not seen the last of Aeon's End on the channel. Next up, though, we continued Christmas in Arkham as we played Arkham Horror 2nd Edition. This one, unlike Eldritch Horror, where you're trying to solve mysteries around the Ancient One, has you trying to close gates in Arkham. And once again, we took on Yog-Sothoth, and here's where the problem with losing Agnes came into play. We actually swapped Diana in for Agnes, and Yog-Sothoth still managed to beat us pretty handily on a 2-0 victory to make it Christmas in Arkham 2-0. We ended up losing Trish on that game, and it actually went haywire pretty quickly. So, as I mentioned, losing Agnes in Eldritch was a big blow because we lost our primary gatekeeper, lost our primary gate closer, which didn't help anything there. So Yog-Sothoth ended up winning Christmas in Arkham this year by a score of 2-0. So that's it for Arkham 2nd Edition. Next up, we stepped into another RPG world as we played Dungeons & Dragons by Wizards of the Coast. If you're an RPG gamer, odds are you've heard of Dungeons & Dragons at some point, so I won't spend too much time hashing over what D&D is all about. What I will say, though, is we started a new freeform story with Burrell and Lyndall. Burrell is my High Elven Wizard, and Lyndall is my Halfling Ranger. They actually recruited a half-orc rogue to the party, and when I went out for a second time, we actually did the second video on D&D, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So I did build a couple new characters, and I may take a team of them into one of my pre-written modules, either Tyranny of Dragons or Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel, and I'd interact with that most likely using Mythic Game Master Emulator, which is something you can use to play RPGs solo if you don't have a Game Master around, which, given the nature of the beast for me on the channel, I have to be both player and DM. So having something like that I can interact with is very handy, and you primarily interact with that through yes or no questions. You might also get some random events coming out of that, but we didn't have any events in either of our playthroughs. And the second time we took D&D out, I was out on the other side of the state, this is where I rolled up the new characters. We rolled up a Warlock and a Paladin. And the test using the pre-written module actually seemed to go pretty well, that's the beauty of using something like Mythic, is you can change the story based on some of the rolls you get there, if you get random events or other things like that, or if a yes or no question turns out on a different answer. So, and that might even be a way to potentially replay some of these modules again, is to get different stories using Mythic. So that's it for Dungeons & Dragons. Next up, we went back to our alternate timeline of World War II Europe, but we switched sides as we played America Bomber, Evil Queen of the Skies. Didn't I create those heroes for D&D with another game? No, I didn't. I didn't create those D&D heroes with another game. I think I actually used ChatGPT to build up those two heroes. What I did, you might be thinking of what I did to generate stats and backstory. I did that last month. So what I did is, another option I've got available to me is I can roll up stats. I think I might have rolled Lyndall this way, and I gave everybody's backstories through the other game. So I rolled up characters' stats using a game called Role Player by Thunderworks Games, and then I rolled up their backstories in Call to Adventure by Brotherwise Games, where Role Player, like I said, is all about rolling up a character's stats, and Call to Adventure is all about building up their characters' backstories. But no, I didn't create those heroes with other games. You're probably thinking of Burrell and Lyndall. Burrell I rolled up and then built her backstory using Call to Adventure. Lyndall, I did both. So I rolled him up in Role Player and then put his backstory together in Call to Adventure. That's probably what you're thinking of. Anyway, coming back to America Bomber, as I mentioned, this is set in the same timeline as Defending America Intercepting the America Bombers is. This time, in this game, you're actually in charge, you're actually in an America Bomber going after the U.S. mainland. So this time we were assigned to hit Philadelphia, and we did manage to do some damage on that one. We've been having some targeting problems, and I really enjoy the game. It's another Gregory Smith design, and another one of those alternate history games, which I really like having the historical theme behind it, but not necessarily the story. I like being able to kind of craft my own narrative in a lot of these war games. So if you like that alternate history, the America Bomber pair of games is probably going to be a good one. Next up, we actually moved over to the links for a game as we played Inside the Cup Golf by Inside Sports Games. No bonus points for guessing. This one's a golf simulator. In this one, we took Tiger Woods over to Augusta National. We ended up 1 over on the day, but it wasn't a completely terrible day. And of the 3 shot-by-shot games I've got, this is probably the simplest one of them because it takes a lot of the thinking out, where after your shot you see where you land. There's also a note in the course to say, okay, you're rolling from this, you're actually taking this shot next. And I want to check one more thing here. I'm pretty sure, yep, okay. I wanted to make sure my mic was into my Razer mic, not my webcam. So we are going into the Razer microphone. So I really do like Inside the Cup Golf, where you can very easily get a hold of everything, all the courses at least. And if you get a hold of all the courses and a season of golfers, I don't think it'll cost you $100 to get a hold of everything. And you can get the courses in PDF. You can get the courses printed or in PDF. I like having them in PDF because I can print them out when I go to play a game and I can jot notes on the course I'm playing. So if I need notes in particular for that day, I can just jot them on that copy of the course. So that's it for Inside the Cup Golf. We'll be having more golf coming up a little bit later. But we played our first football game of the month on the channel next, as we played Glory Days Pro Football by Sideline Strategy Games. This one's a football simulator. You also think I'll like Dice Nuts Golf. Pretty easy and quick game. I may actually grab that. I've been looking at the Dice Nuts games off and on. Some of them I'm kind of hesitant around, but I may grab some of those. I'm still kind of processing what I want to do for any kind of orders. I am going to be placing a couple probably in the next few days. So I may go back to Dice Nuts and see what I can do with that. But coming back to Glory Days Pro Football, again, football simulator. For this one, we did a Super Bowl 58 replay from the 2023 season between the San Francisco 49ers and the Kansas City Chiefs. San Francisco managed to win that game 24-14. And it's actually a pretty straightforward system. You've got 2D10, 2D6, and a D20 that you roll, and I'm kind of gaseous tonight. You roll them through, and depending on whatever situation you've got, you come up with the play from that. I'm also contemplating adding a full game with a ticker test for a future season replay. The ticker I'd be using would probably be Ultra Quick Football by Downey Games, which I used when I did my 1972 NFL season replay in Momentum Football. Which actually, that was a pretty quick playthrough. That was a pretty quick replay. So, yeah, just kind of musings on football. Like I said, we'll probably throw a ticker test in with Glory Days at some point to see what I think of doing a replay. That's it for Glory Days Pro Football. Next up, we move back to the Cthulhu Mythos, for what's actually a fairly simple game, and Roll for Great Old Ones by Hodari Spiel. This one's got a few scenarios set in the Cthulhu Mythos, where you're rolling the dice to determine the strength of the actions, and you're basically trying to stop the cultists from advancing through their ritual and destroying the world. We went through the first scenario of this game, and we managed to win it. I don't think there were any major misplays that we had. I do enjoy this game, and it's good for a quick mythos fix if you're looking for that. And it's a fairly simple game. I didn't do a teaching game of it per se, but you guys can probably gather how that game works. Before we move into our next game, though, I do need to take a quick drink. Welcome in, Doug. We're just going through everything that we did for the month. Next up, we went to the baseball diamond, and I think this was the first time we played a baseball game in the whole month. And looking back through my list of games, this was the first time we played a baseball game, as we played Appa Baseball by Appa Games. No bonus points for guessing what this one is. It's a baseball simulator. It's got a D66 system where you've got two different colored dice in the shaker, and I read them 10s, then 1s, as I think probably most everybody does. For this one, we went back to 2004 with a matchup between the Minnesota Twins and the Boston Red Sox. The Twins won 3-1, and I was using only basic. I haven't really done much with the Master game in Appa, and I'm probably not going to, just because it looks fairly convoluted. But I do really enjoy the quick flow. And this one's very conducive with Digital Diamond, which I wasn't having any problems with Digital Diamond on this one. That's been one of my biggest fights, is I've been getting used to these baseball games, and now having a helper to help me along with compiling stats and all of that good stuff. So definitely looking forward to seeing more of Appa Baseball on the channel. Next up, we moved back into our different war perspective game as we played This War of Mine by Awakened Realms. This War of Mine puts you in charge of a group of civilians trapped in a war zone trying to survive. We continued the playthrough with one turn. And actually, one turn works pretty well in these videos. Zlata, who's one of our heroes on the team, actually took some wounds coming out of that from, I think it was it a night raid, or was she on guard duty? I think she was on guard duty that night. So she actually took some wounds. But I do enjoy watching the narrative unfold in that one. And I've talked about it before, where it's good to give you a different perspective of war, because we've played a few different war games already this month, and we kind of romanticize a little bit about war a bit. We say, you're a pilot, go get those bastards, or you're a tank captain, shoot everybody up, or you're a U-boat captain, destroy as much shipping as you can. So we kind of, I think as a society in general, and as war gamers in particular, we kind of romanticize war a little bit, and yes, it is definitely a serious survival game, so you need to go into that, you need to know that going into This War of Mine. So it's also kind of that different perspective, where it lets you see what the people who are stuck in the war zone, or stuck behind the lines, or whatever, it lets you see what they're going through, and what they have to do to survive, and what else might be happening around you. So again, do kind of keep that perspective in mind if you pick up This War of Mine. So that's it for that. Next game we played was Dune Imperium by Dire Wolf Digital. This one's set in the Dune universe, and you're trying to take control of the spice of Arrakis. I really enjoy this game, but we were taking on Richese and I believe the Baron. We were playing as Lady, I want to say Katrana Prestor, but that's not right. I forget what her name is, but we were playing as the Spice Addict. Richese very much ran away with this game. We were playing with the Rise of Ix expansion. I do really enjoy this game, though. It's, to me, deck, and I've talked about this before. Deck building is a mechanic I really adore. Worker placement, I kind of can take or leave that. So put the two together, you'd probably expect me to be somewhere in the middle and just kind of be like, meh, it's a game. But I've really enjoyed my plays of Dune Imperium, and I do see this hitting the channel again. I'm not sure when, though, just because I've got a lot of other things coming up. So that's it for Doug Plays Dune Imperium on PC. Very good game. I'll have to look that up. It's probably like a TTS module or something like that. Anyway, next up we went back into the Skies Over World War II Europe again. This time we played Night Fighter Ace by Compass Games. This one puts us in charge of a German night fighter over the skies of World War II Europe, trying to defend from Allied air raids over Germany. Unfortunately, in this one, we had a short stream of quiet sorties where we didn't have much going on. We also had a promotion roll that we went for, but we failed on that roll. I do still enjoy the game, again, watching the narrative unfold in... Greg Smith actually does a great job with a lot of those narrative-focused games. where you can really get into them and tell your own story with whatever pilot you're going into. So a full-blown game on... There's actually a full-blown game for Dune Imperium on Steam. I will have to look into that. Let me just make a note here so I don't forget. Okay, so I got that noted. I'll check into that. Anyway, that's it for Night Fighter Ace. Next up, we continued our new background campaign in Hero Realms. This one is a deck builder. If you played Star Realms, they're both by the same company, Wise Wizard Games. If you played one, you've basically played the other. The only question is, what do you want for a coat of paint? And Jester's right that the Steam one is the one that Doug plays. Okay, I'll look into that as well. Anyway, coming back to Hero Realms, in our background campaign of this one, we took on the Vexing Imp in the second encounter, and we managed to defeat that one easily. The Imp more annoyed us, I think, than attacked us, but we were able to keep all of the minions at bay for that one. And I do enjoy the campaign focus. The only thing I don't like, and it's a problem with a lot of other campaign games, is what I call that treadmill campaign experience. Excuse me. What I mean by the treadmill campaign experience is you have to win each scenario to move on to the next one. And the way I'm going to deal with the treadmill campaign experience in Hero Realms or any other games that have that is I'm going to play through the scenario up to twice. If I have to reset a scenario twice or three over the course of the campaign, then I wrap the campaign and just call it over at that point. Hero Realms is a neat game. How much did I like it? Not sure about the replayability. I think the replayability in Hero Realms comes from some of the different choices you can make, but mainly in the different characters. So we were playing as the wizard in our first playthrough. Now I'm going through it again as the ranger. But I'm trying to find a way to beat there was actually the last boss that we need to... There's actually one boss in the second half of the campaign that I need to go through. There is a Kickstarter coming in for that, and I'll be looking to explore that on the channel as well. It's Hero Realms Dungeons, I want to say. I do, like I said, Jester, I really do enjoy Hero Realms. And if you played Star Realms, you've essentially played Hero Realms. It's just Star Realms with a fantasy coat of paint. Or if you pick up Hero Realms first, Star Realms is Hero Realms with a sci-fi coat of paint. So it's all about what kind of theme you want coming out of that. There are also extra challenges that you can use in Hero Realms. I forget what you have to go through to pick those up. Probably either of the campaign boxes. So Ruins of Thandar and the Lost Village are your two campaign boxes in Hero Realms. So definitely the campaign to go through there. Anyway, that'll do it for Hero Realms. Next up, we went into our next football game for the month as we played 5D20 Football by Inside Sports Games. This one, just like it sounds, is a football simulator. I didn't want to play through the entire game, so we played the fourth quarter of a game between the Cincinnati Bengals and the San Diego Chargers. The Bengals won this one 27-13, and just like the name sounds, you roll 5d20s and then you read them through to get what your play is and the result of you get your play, who the key target is, who the key defender is, and then go through the results of the play. So the flow really isn't there because you're stopping to say, okay, this die means this means this, yada, yada, yada. Because of how that was going, I didn't run the ticker test, but I could use it for a replay if I play only the fourth quarter of the game. And I do expect the length of the game to come down with practice. So it's actually another fairly cheap game. I want to say the seasons for 5D20 are probably going to run you like $15-20 on PDF. Let me just look that up here real quick. Actually, we'll look up Inside the Cup Golf as well. Very limited season availability, though, so if you get into 5D20, do be aware of that. Seasons are going to run you between $13 and $15 on PDF. As for Inside the Cup Golf, if you get everything PDF, yeah, you can easily get all the courses along with a season of golfers for just a little over $70. So basically a steal for the amount of content you get with Inside the Cup Golf. 5D20 Football, similar. Anyway, we're far from done with sports games, though, as next up, we played Season Ticket Baseball. This one's a baseball simulator by Sports Mogul. We actually played this one twice. The first time we went with a 2002 matchup between the Colorado Rockies and the San Francisco Giants. The Giants managed to win this one 7-3. I still was kind of fighting a little bit with Digital Diamond, and I have been since I've kind of gotten into that. But I think I'm getting the hang of Digital Diamond at this point. The second time we played season ticket baseball was the day after Christmas for the 1985 demo game, as we played the Oakland Athletics at the Pittsburgh Pirates, aka the World Series for my 1991 World Series. The Pirates won that game 1-0, and I feel ready for the 1985 replay. Philip Anderson wants to know, what am I going to do with the season ticket postseason? If you're around for my Payoff Pitch Baseball 91 playoffs replay, it's going to be the exact same structure of that, where I've got I've got all my divisional alignments set up based on the historical divisions in 1985. I'm going to take the top 3 teams from each division, and every team has to have a winning record or the playoffs will be modified. So based on the record after the division champions, the 6 seed will play the 5 seed at the 5 seed in the first wild card game. Then the winner of that will play at the 4 seed in the second wild card game for each league. And then the winner of all of that will advance and play against the 1 seed in the division series. So hopefully that answers your question. Let me see if I can explain it a little bit better and come up with a little bit less of a word salady answer in chat. So each league, let's try this. Each league, top 3 teams. Otherwise, coming out of that, everything else is going to be exactly the same. So the wild card games are going to be 1 game playoffs. Then the division series will be best of 5. LCS and the World Series best of 7. So other than that, everything's going to be exactly the same as it will be in real baseball. So hopefully that makes sense for you, Philip. Moving away from season ticket baseball next, we actually finished up Christmas in Arkham as we played Elder Sign. Once again, we were against Yogg-Sothoth for Christmas in Arkham, and the way the game went, Yogg-Sothoth actually managed to wake up. But we salvaged a disaster of that campaign by defeating Yogg-Sothoth after he woke up to end up with a 2-1 score after winning the Ancient One battle. Elder Sign is basically Cthulhu Yahtzee, where you're trying to match up your rolls to whatever the adventure calls for. Let me take a quick drink here. You've got to be aware of other effects, though. You've got like your entry effects that go off when you enter an adventure or when you go to start it, midnights that go off at midnight, and terror results that go off if you roll a terror and fail to clear anything. So I don't remember who I subbed in for Trish, but we did manage to win Elder Sign against Yogg-Sothoth, so we salvaged a disaster. Each league or each division. That's going to be each league. So each league will take the top 3 teams of each division. Everybody's got to have an over 500 record, a winning record, or the playoffs will be modified. And then the wildcard games are as I described in chat. So hopefully that all makes sense for you, Philip. But I'll be happy to explain things if you need me to. Anyway, stepping back out of Elder Sign now. The next game we played was Twilight Inscription by Fantasy Flight. This is a roll and write game set in the Twilight Imperium universe, but actually manageable to play in less than a day. You can actually play a game of Twilight Inscription. I can usually solo a game of Twilight Inscription in about an hour. It might take me like 2 hours at the most if I'm playing this in a group. For this game we took out the Nazroka Alliance, but they ended up as a footnote in galactic history. As I mentioned, it's good for a quick TI fix, and it's a standard beat the high score solo mode. it can be a little bit complicated as you're first playing it, but once you start figuring it out, you start to figure out the strategies that go with it as well to make everything work better for you. So that's it for Twilight Inscription. Next up, we went back to another football ticker test as we revisited the system of my 1972 NFL season replay as we played Momentum Football by Downey Games. This one, unlike 5D20 Football or Glory Days Pro Football, is a drive-by-drive game where you roll for each drive. In this one, I was actually running a test of a season block using double feature games. This was actually a suggestion that Philip made coming out of my 1972 NFL season replay. For this one, we had the Kansas City Chiefs playing against the LA Raiders, I think, and then the Minnesota Vikings visiting the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. LA beat Kansas City in their game, and then Minnesota beat Tampa Bay. I really enjoy this game as it's a very, very quick playing football game. It gives me the flavor without burying me in the minutia and the details. Adding a second feature game caused me absolutely no problem with the tickers other than making the video a little bit longer, but I don't mind a longer video. Just because there were some other problems with the 1972 replay where teams were getting shut out on the board left, right, and center. So there were a lot of teams that didn't even get featured in my 72 replay, and the ticker may have caused one winless season. But when I do Momentum Football replays moving forward, we will be using double feature games on that. So that's it for Momentum Football. Next, we went into an old favorite as we played Terra Mystica. Terra Mystica is a Euro game by Feuerland Spiel, which has you building up living space for your civilization by way of victory points. Whichever faction gets the most victory points wins. In this one, we took the halflings out versus the druids. We actually managed to win this game. I do enjoy it, but I'm starting to get a little bit hesitant around Terra Mystica just because of static everything, where the tracks don't change, the favor tokens don't even change really, and the cult tracks you largely don't get anything from, which is probably one of my biggest points of contention with Terra Mystica. So once again, I'm going to take a quick drink before we continue. Our next game was we stayed in the Terra Mystica universe. We just moved to space as we played Gaia Project. This is basically the exact same game as Terra Mystica, but you're in space. We were also playing with the new Lost Fleet expansion. We took out the Darkanians, which is one of the faction expansions in the Lost Fleet, versus the Taklons. I want a Nailbiter in that game, but I don't particularly like the expansion. I didn't like some of the new stuff that was added. I think the only thing I really liked was the 3 different ships. But given that it would come with everything else, like the asteroids and the what's the word for the planets? I want to say terraform, but I know that's not it. Protoplanets is the next name that jumps to mind, but I wouldn't swear that's right either. I didn't really like those, and if you start as a faction that plays on those planets, you seem to be at a bit of a disadvantage because you can't even get to your home planet again without spending the resources to get to it. Where you'd have to spend your 3 terraforming steps again to get to the protoplanet if you're starting on that planet. Or you have to spend, I forget what it is to get on the asteroids, but I just didn't really like what the expansion brought. And I don't see myself doing anything with that. So, alright, before we move on, we do have an AMA question here, late arriving to the live stream. Perhaps this has been answered already. You're curious to know what line of work I'm in. Happy New Year. You'd like to see Spirit Island return soon. Well, it's probably not going to be soon that I get back to Spirit Island, although I did stop by yesterday to play that with Jester. I'll talk a little bit about that later. But as far as what kind of work I'm in, I'm an analyst at a shipping supply company where I do a lot of reports on a given day. I'm responsible for a lot of our weekly and monthly reports, mainly our sales report, mainly sales reporting in the department I'm in. So hopefully that answers your question, NJ Olson. I'm an analyst is kind of what that boils down to. So coming back to our games, we actually went to another football game as we played APA football. This one's another football simulator in the APA world using the D66 system. And just like what I did with 5D20 football, I only played the fourth quarter. I'd come up with a set of house rules and roles to get me into the fourth quarter of the game because I didn't want to play through the entire game. I knew playing through an entire game was going to take me like 5-6 hours, and no. Not going to do that even on an exhibition game, and certainly not if I'm going to use it for a replay. But I do like the house rules that I came up with to roll for the situation going into the fourth quarter. We had the Seattle Seahawks and the Philadelphia Eagles out for this ticker test. Seahawks won this game 33-28. The flow here isn't actually all that terrible, and the game actually seems pretty straightforward. Admittedly, I haven't played the master game of this one yet either. I've only done basic for this one. So we'll probably be doing more of APA football. I'm thinking about getting another season of APA football, maybe the 2001 season. I'm also thinking about ordering some season ticket football, just because of how much I like season ticket baseball and wanting to try out season ticket football and look for other good football simulators. But that's it for APA football. Next, we're going to move back to the Terra Mystica world for the last time as we played Age of Innovation. This is almost... I wouldn't just go far. I wouldn't go so far as to say this is just a Terra Mystica replacement, but it's pretty close, I would say. This has got a lot of Terra Mystica vibes to it. First, we'll talk about what actually happened in the game. Then I'll kind of talk about the three a little bit. Terra Mystica, Gaia Project, and Age of Innovation. We had the Navigators starting in swamps versus the Druids. I very much ran away with this game, and I really enjoy it. And I think the simplest way to describe Age of Innovation is more variable Terra Mystica. So what do I mean by more variable? You can end up with a different combination of factions and starting tiles, or starting terrain types. Whereas in Terra Mystica, you might have the witches who can only start on the forests. In Age of Innovation, you might end up with, say, witches starting out in mountains, or gnomes starting out in the wasteland, or what else is there? Psychics starting out in swamps. And then all of those can mix up as well. There's also the thing, and Gaia Project does this as well, where the competency tiles in Age of Innovation are actually spread out among the different reward types. So you'd end up with a one-time bonus of victory points, workers, coins, stuff like that. That'll be in a different place theoretically every different time you play the game. And the innovations will give you varying combinations as well. Plus, you'll get different palace tiles every game, so there's a ton of replayability when it comes to Age of Innovation. Whereas I don't feel the same way about Terra Mystica. That's a largely static game, and in fact, if you were to put a gun to my head and tell me, Phoenix Knight, you can only keep one of Age of Innovation or Terra Mystica, I'm keeping Age of Innovation just because there's a lot more replayability to Age of Innovation. I don't know if I'm going to sell Terra Mystica or what I'm going to do with that, but let's see, good overview of those three games. So, yeah, Gaia Project, I kind of glossed over Gaia Project a little bit, but it's basically, I would call Gaia Project kind of the gateway, kind of the transition point between Terra Mystica and Age of Innovation. Where you've got Terra Mystica, you've got enough of it in Gaia Project, but you're starting to see the pieces kind of move into place. Where you've got the research tracks now actually starting to give you bonuses, and the tech tiles are spread out all around. The standard tech tiles are going to be in different configuration every game, and you'll get a different configuration of your advanced tech tiles in every game. And then Age of Innovation expands on that variability, where it varies how the competency tiles are laid out, what palace tiles are available, and what innovations are available. So again, simplest way to describe Age of Innovation, variable Terra Mystica. Anyway, I'm rambling on Age of Innovation. Next up, we've got what I call Italian Hunters, aka Beneath the Med, by GMT Games. This one is basically Italian the Hunters, like I said. We took out Commandant Corleone on patrols for this one. He's off to a pretty decent start. I forget what exactly the number is for shipping he's destroyed so far. But yeah, again, if you've played the Hunters, you played Silent Med or Silent Victory, you've played some of the other games that Greg Smith has done, you're going to pick up Beneath the Med pretty quickly. Next game we played was Heat Pedal to the Metal by, I forget who that's by, but Heat Pedal to the Metal is a racing game, and I normally don't go for racing games, but this one I really liked. Where this one we lost a close race in Italy after leading most of the way. It's a very simple racing game. It's not a deck builder per se, but it's got a lot of variability to it. And Jester with an AMA question, did I get Wolfpack? With all the sub games, I might like it. I looked at Wolfpack, I had it P500'd, but then I decided to pull that P500 back. So no, I didn't get Wolfpack. I'll have to look into that though. I'm trying to be a little bit more picky about the games I get, and I'll talk more about that when I get into my 2024 end of year chat / 2025 kind of musings on where I think things are going to go on the channel. So what that boils down to is on your AMA, did I get Wolfpack? No, I didn't get Wolfpack. That's it for Heat Pedal to the Metal. Next up, we played Star Realms by Wise Wizard Games. I kind of touched on what Star Realms is earlier when I was talking about Hero Realms. Star Realms is basically Hero Realms with a sci-fi coat of paint. It's a very simple deck builder where you're trying to reduce your opponent's authority to 0 before they do the same to you. Or in the case of the solo mode, we're trying to defeat whatever challenge we've got. In this case, we took on the Dimensional Horror from Frontiers. We actually won a close fight on this one. It was coming down to, they had some pretty expensive cards in the tentacles, but we managed to put some things together, and we managed to get through that tentacle very easily. I do still really enjoy the game, and if I need something quick, I'll pull out Star or Hero Realms, and away I'll go. So that's it for Star Realms. I'm going to take a quick break because I feel like I'm getting a little bit of a frog in my throat, so I can get some cough drops over here. So, be right back. And we're back, now that I've got a cough drop in my mouth. Next up, we had a couple of sessions of Call of Cthulhu by Chaosium. Call of Cthulhu is another one of the big, heavy role-playing games. This one's by Chaosium, set in the Cthulhu mythos, using a D100 system based on your skills. When you roll a check, you want to be at or under your skill to succeed, but you got some mitigation for that as well. We played a couple different sessions. Our first session we finished up, actually it was both sessions that we went through. I think this might have been the adventure through. We actually played a pre-written adventure in the Doors to Darkness, which is one of the books that I have for Call of Cthulhu. Phillips played Heat before. I actually really like Heat Pedal to the Metal. Coming back to Call of Cthulhu though, we started exploring a tunnel underneath a friend's house. Unfortunately, Silas was our character. He ended up dead in a cavern of serpent people, despite OBS technical details and poison fungi. As he was getting hungry down there, he tried to eat something, and it ended up coming back and killing him. I really enjoy creating the story, whether I'm doing it through the Solo Investigator's Handbook for a free form, or using Mythic and interacting with a pre-written adventure. Which, as I talked about before with D&D, using Mythic can give you different turns on your story, with stuff like your cutscenes or just something not being there, stuff like that. So that's it for Call of Cthulhu. Next up, we went to another space RPG as we played 5 Parsecs from Home from Modiphius Entertainment. 5 Parsecs from Home is a space RPG that wargamers will probably find a lot familiar in. You roll going from chart to chart and craft a story based on your session. In our session that we played of this, we actually picked up a new rival as we shed the Pirates from Tansin Alpha as a rival. I do have to roll for the new rival, but I'll roll for that next time we put that on the channel. And I really enjoy the game and watching the narrative unfold. So it's a sci-fi RPG, which I really like those. It's the second one I've got in addition to Star Wars Force and Destiny. And it's completely kind of all on my own. Where I've even got a set of sci-fi. I've actually got a pretty big book of sci-fi random tables. If there's anything I need, I can just go to that table, roll for whatever, and then use the result from there. In fact, I think that's how I got the world that we've been stuck on for the last 3 or 4 sessions of 5 Parsecs from Home. So that's it for 5 Parsecs from Home. Next week in the next video, we had another RPG session. This was another one when I was out on the other side of the state, as we played Arkham Horror, the role-playing game. This is a role-playing game set in the Arkham Horror files, once again based on the Cthulhu mythos. This one's a little bit different from Call of Cthulhu, though, in that you're using a bunch of D6s in what's known as the dice pool system. So you essentially spend those dice to perform actions, whether it's in a narrative scene where you're telling the story, or in a more structured scene where the heat's on, like in a battle, or if there's something where time is sensitive, stuff like that. And the first time we played this, I actually played through using the starter set of the Arkham Horror role-playing game starter set, where we're starting to play through a Night of the Zealot-esque story. Now, I can only play Night of the Zealot-esque stories so many times before they drive me nuts, and Doug is waiting for Fields of Fire Deluxe. That'll be one of his games for 2025. Nice. Coming back to Arkham Horror, the role-playing game, I had Carolyn and Rita started on a freeform Innsmouth story as I was interacting with that, as I was putting that together using Mythic Game Master emulator. We managed to find Jenny on our way to Innsmouth, and I actually do find that dice pool system to be interesting. In terms of the story, it kind of does feel a little bit like a Call of Cthulhu knockoff, but I'm probably going to do more with it just because that dice pool system is fairly interesting and it's different. Whereas another game I was planning on putting on the channel, a game called Delta Green by Arc Dream Publishing, the more I was reading that, the more that ended up feeling like a Call of Cthulhu knockoff. I was going to put that on the channel when I was out on the other side of the state, but I decided not to do that. Just because the more I read it, the more A, I wasn't completely making sense of it, and B, like I said, it was feeling like a Call of Cthulhu knockoff. So I may end up moving that out of the collection, since it seems like a more modern Call of Cthulhu, and if I want a more modern Call of Cthulhu, all I've got to do is say, hey, we're setting this in the mid-1990s, or whenever, and then play with the stuff like that. So, probably not that hard to bring Call of Cthulhu into modern times. So Delta Green is probably going to move off, I think. That's it for Arkham Horror, the role-playing game. Next up, we went to another role-playing game as we played Dragon Age tabletop role-playing game. This is a game set in the Dragon Age universe, which admittedly is not a universe I'm completely familiar with, so that might be a reason to move off of Dragon Age. I am still enjoying that, though. And we took out Adana Brightmare, who is one of our characters. She ended up getting attacked by a rabid dog as she's still on her way to the Mage Tower to try to find her trainer. She managed to defeat the dog, but barely, and now the apothecary is going to have to heal her before they head into the Mage Tower. Assuming we have found the Mage Tower, but Adana needs some healing before before she heads into that Mage Tower. That's another RPG, and I really enjoy the story of that. If I could only keep D&D or Dragon Age, I honestly don't know which one I would keep. That would be a tough call. But that's it for Dragon Age. Next up, we played a couple games of Marvel Champions. This is what I alluded to Marvel Champions earlier in the stream when I was talking about Sentinels of the Multiverse, where you're in control of heroes in the Marvel Comics universe, and you actually build a deck for your hero rather than having a pre-built deck. We played a couple games of this. In the first one, we took Storm and Widow out versus Absorbing Man, and we got hammered in that game. He actually took out Storm, and then Black Widow realized she was alone, and I don't know if he schemed out or if he defeated Black Widow. But either way, we lost that game where Storm and Black Widow tried to take on Absorbing Man. So for a second game the same day, I swapped Storm out for Phoenix, and we actually managed to win that one. It was another nail-biter, though, where we managed to pull that one off. I do really enjoy Marvel Champions, because there are so many heroes to it, and the deck building options are nearly limitless. So, for instance, I've built Phoenix with an aggression build. Maybe Jester will pull her out and go leadership with her. But that's the beautiful thing of Marvel Champions. Everybody can do a different thing with any of the heroes. Although there are some that just play one way. Like I think Hulk is one that you can only play aggression. So there are some limits, but mostly there are a lot of options available to you in Marvel Champions, and I really enjoy that. So the next game we played, we started to get into some baseball simulators, as next up we got into Inside Pitch Baseball by Inside Sports Games. For this one, we went to 2011 Camden Yards, as we had a matchup between the New York Yankees and the Baltimore Orioles, which the Orioles won that game 5-4. I've talked before about how torn I am about Inside Pitch, where I started purging some of my collections of some of my seasons of Inside Pitch into other systems. I've talked about being torn about Inside Pitch, where on the one hand, I really like the narrative that Inside Pitch brings you, but on the other, it has been such a chore for me to learn Inside Pitch and try to make heads or tails of it. And I'm still not completely to a point where I would feel comfortable doing a replay of Inside Pitch. In fact, when I was originally going to do 1985 in Inside Pitch, I instead decided to do it in Season Ticket after I had a few streams of Inside Pitch where I just had a meltdown and I was not very happy at all. And Jester can tell you guys some of the horror stories about those. But yeah, that's where kind of the Inside Pitch purge started. And then I moved 1985 over to Season Ticket, and the rest, as they say, is history. File that away for now. We're going to come back to it. Anyway, next up after Inside Pitch Baseball, we went back to the links for another game as we played APA Golf by APA Games. I was intending to go through a full round of golf on the Sunday when I pulled this out. But yeah, it was a rough start for Inside Pitch, and it's still been it hasn't exactly been smooth going for Inside Pitch. Coming back to APA Golf, though, this is another one set in the APA world, using that D66 system. We took Arnold Palmer over to, it wasn't DC Metro, I think we took him to Badger Links. And I went 1 under on the 4 holes that I played. And the reason I went through 4 holes is because some other people came out who had never seen APA Golf before, so I decided to slow it down and make it more of a demonstration game, similar to what I did with 1985 for my Season Ticket demo game, just to kind of walk through, okay, here's how you make a shot, and kind of walking through my thought process in making some of my shots. And I've also got a bit of a convoluted color system with my flags, but it all makes sense to me, so that's my playing of APA Golf. Next up, we went back to the battle over Britain as we played Skies Above Britain by GMT Games. This one actually turned out to be a bit too much, I think, where the patrol that we were going through was not going well at all, and as we were playing through that, once again, Jester can tell you guys more about my experiences about that, but I was not having a good time with Skies Above Britain. I was starting to realize that it was just a little bit too much. For some things that could have easily been a die roll, or, all good, Jester. There are a lot of things there that could have easily been a die roll, or whatever. But it just ended up being, to me, it just ended up being a very convoluted mess. Skies Above Britain is a game that I've really wanted to like since I got into war games, but I'm just not. I may put it on the channel like 1 or 2 more times, but I have a feeling if I don't start making heads or tails a little bit better of Skies Above Britain, that's probably going to be a game that's going to start heading toward the outdoor on my collection. Anyway, that's it for Skies Above Britain. Next up, we went to baseball games to finish the year, as we played first Stratomatic Baseball by Stratomatic Games. For this one, we went to 2013 with a matchup between the Philadelphia Phillies and the Arizona Diamondbacks. The Phillies won this game 8-6. But my takeaway from this is that I'm still not completely comfortable with Strat Baseball. It just, I don't know, it doesn't have that real intuitive flow to it, and I think I was trying to add in some advanced and super advanced rules. So I think that might have been where I was getting a little bit tripped up on how things were working in Strat. I'm probably going to keep working on getting that on the channel just because I don't have another system available for replays. But if you were to ask me to do a replay in 5 minutes of Strat, I'd probably tell you no. I'm not going to be able to put together a season replay of that. Now, in a system I could and have put a season replay together for, we played Payoff Pitch Baseball by Sideline Strategy Games. This one I really like because it interacts off both the pitcher and the batter cards. For this one, we went to 2016, and we had a matchup between the Yankees and the Red Sox. That was actually our game this morning, as the Red Sox won that one, I want to say, by a score of 5-4, but don't quote me on that score. Anyway, I do really enjoy Payoff Pitch, and as I mentioned, I did my 1991 season replay in Payoff Pitch. You guys, if you're regulars on the channel, you guys know the story of how that started off the channel because I got sick immediately after baseball testing, but I moved to the playoffs on the channel once we got into the postseason. And the 91 replay, the Pirates did end up winning the World Series. So I definitely see myself doing more with Payoff Pitch Baseball, but not in the immediate future. So looking at the clock, I can't believe we're over an hour in, and I've got to find my notes. We're an hour in, and after I take a quick drink of my Crystal Light, we are just now going to be getting into Mystical Munchies. Yeah. Again, it's been quite the stream when we're an hour in, when we're just now talking about Mystical Munchies. AMA, why the lap blanket? Did I stop paying my utility bills in order to afford more board games? No, I didn't stop paying my utility bills to afford more board games. This lap blanket, actually, if you're around for my post-Christmas unboxing, was a Christmas present I got from my mom. That was a quilt that's got all kinds of Phoenix images. I'm not going to zoom out on this one, but I did kind of want to show this blanket off. So no, I didn't pay I didn't stop paying the utility bills. But moving over to Mystical Munchies now. For Mystical Munchies this month, the scheduled cookbook was out of the Magic the Gathering Cuisines of the Multiverse cookbook, and we had a special Christmas episode. I'll explain more about that when we get to that Christmas episode of Mystical Munchies. So first up, out of the Magic cookbook, we had the appetizer, which was the blueberry scones. These were actually very good and not too terribly hard to put together. There was a very heavy, I think it was a little heavier lemon flavor than I would have expected there to be, just because of the lemon zest I was using as part of the recipe. As for the side, we made the ooze-infused biscuits, which were basically like super cheesy biscuits. I was very happy with this recipe. They reminded me slightly of the Cheddar Bay biscuits from Red Lobster, if you remember those back in the day, but they were a lot more buttery than the Cheddar Bay biscuits were. As for the entree out of the Magic Cookbook, we had the Jumpstart Energy Bowls. I was happy with how the granola came out in that recipe, but I did not like the tea yogurt at all, and I don't know if the problem there was that's just how it's supposed to go, or I wasn't able to get my hands on actual acai fruit. Maybe it'll work better if I use the actual acai fruit rather than the acai powder, which is all I was able to get a hold of. So if I can actually find acai, maybe I'll revisit this recipe at some point. As for our Christmas episode of Mystical Munchies, we actually went back to the Fallout Official Vault Dwellers cookbook for the Captain's Feast, which was roast prime rib. When I was originally going to do this recipe back in June, I wasn't able to get a hold of the prime rib at the time, so I figured out I was going to have to reschedule it, and then the idea hit me. Around the holidays, my family always does prime rib, so I shot a message to my family asking if they'd be okay with me making the prime rib for Christmas. So they said, yeah, we're okay with that, and then we played around with the schedule a little bit so I could stay away from times when the house was going to be noisy, when the house out there was going to be noisy. Everybody ended up being very happy with the prime rib. Having to transport it, though, was a little bit of a challenge, because if you remember that Christmas episode, I started the prime rib on this side of the state, but I had to transport it I had to cover it in foil so I could transport it in my roaster. It would probably work a lot better if I didn't have to worry about transporting it, because I was nervous the whole time that I was going to take a curve funny and ruin the prime rib, because I had a lot of money tied up in that prime rib. I think the rib ended up being about $50 all told. I forget how much it was, but it was a fairly pricey prime rib, so I wanted to be very careful with that. Then the dessert as we moved back to the Magic cookbook was Life of the Party, which this ended up being basically oil-fried dough balls. Oil-fried dough balls in a special sweet sauce. These turned out okay, definitely not something to write home about. And it ended up being a lot of effort for something that ultimately was just meh. Like nothing memorable that I really wouldn't do much with. AMA, what does my mom think of my channel and the time and effort I put into it? And what does she think of my cooking? She doesn't really say much about the channel or the time and effort I put into it. Mainly because it's kind of my hobby at this point, is my channel. And what does she think of my cooking? Well, she actually does think I'm a pretty good cook, and you saw at least her reaction if you watched that Christmas episode on the roast prime rib to when she took her first bite of the prime rib. She was very happy with that. And she's happy that I'm also a good cook. So we've got all of that there. And then that's it for the scheduled stuff. Now let's talk about a couple of special topics, as I do have a pair of special topics that I want to talk about. First up is just a very slight end-of-the-year chat for 2024. We did a lot of stuff on the channel. I'm not going to go through every single thing I did on the channel, just kind of the bigger points of that, where we changed it up a little bit because there was a different campaign I wanted to go through in the fall campaign. Normally I do 3 campaigns in Arkham Horror, the card game. As of now, I'm going to try to get back to that because I wanted to do... There was an Astro Knights Eternity campaign that I wanted to go through, so I kind of changed up the schedule a little bit on that. So my goals for this year, I'd like to finish at least one sports season replay and at least one of my background play games. So I've got several games kind of percolating around in the background, like my Hero Realms background campaign, Mag 23 Guadalcanal, Tally Ho, all my Greg Smith games. I'd like to get at least one of those in addition to a sports season replay closed out. And I know it's kind of a little bit of cheating, but I've got one starting up tomorrow, but I'll talk more about that when we get to coming in January. So those are my main goals for the year, to finish a sports season replay and at least one of those background playthroughs. Then let's talk a little bit about the RPGs on the channel. You guys have seen me do more and more with RPGs on the channel. I'm very happy with how those are turning out, and I'd like to try to put at least one session of an RPG per month on the channel. That'll pick up during sports season off seasons most likely, but I would like to try to work on some of those as well, especially setting up some tests with Mythic and doing some of the pre-written modules, so I can do, say, an adventure in Call of Cthulhu here, or start into a campaign in D&D there, or something with Star Wars, stuff like that. So we have seen far from the last of RPG stuff on the channel. So now with that in mind, I'm going to take another quick drink, and then we'll talk about what's coming in January. NJ Olson's got to get started on his own mystical munchies. Hopes the blender behaves in 2025. Yeah, I hope all of my appliances behave in 2025. But talking about coming in January, we are going to waste no time, as tomorrow morning is the long-awaited opening day in my 1985 replay in Season Ticket Baseball. I'm going to stream that 6 days a week. The only day I'm not going to stream that on is Wednesday, just because I know I need other games to break up the replay. So I am going to be still doing other stuff on Sundays and Wednesdays, but otherwise it's pretty much all going to be Season Ticket. Speaking of that, we are going to have the winter campaign in Arkham Horror, the card game, coming up. The winter campaign I'm going to do this year is going to be the Scarlet Keys. It's the second most recent campaign after the Feast of Hemlock Vale. The Drowned City hasn't come out yet, so I'm not counting that as a recent campaign, even though that is the next campaign, where we're supposed to meet the big guy himself, Cthulhu. So normally when those new campaigns come out, is I try to play them at least once with my group, just so I can get the feel for, okay, how am I going to shoot this? Because I'm usually using the actual cards to do that. But I might actually use there's a module that I might use in Arkham Horror, the card game, that I might use to stream that campaign instead. I haven't decided on that yet. That's going to depend on if my game group continues with Arkham, but we probably are going to continue with that. So again, the winter campaign this year is going to be Scarlet Keys. I've got to sit down and build the decks for those coming up soon. I'm expecting the intro to that campaign to be Saturday between Mystical Munchies and the schedule block in in my 1985 replay in Season Ticket Baseball. As for what else is coming up on the channel, right. What I've got scheduled right now for Wednesdays is we're going to go back to G.I. Joe, the deck building game. We'll do another sortie in America Bomber, Evil Queen of the Skies. We'll have another session of Dragon Age tabletop role-playing game. And I originally had a brand new game scheduled on the channel in Twilight Struggle, Red Sea, Conflict in the Horn of Africa. But now I'm starting to go back and forth on that one, because in my plays of Twilight Struggle, I have not liked that system at all. So I may abort that for something else on the channel, but I'll make that call when it gets a little bit closer. So that's for Wednesdays. As for Mystical Munchies in January will be taking us back to a cookbook that we did previously, as we will be going back to the Marvel Eat the Universe cookbook. This time we'll be doing Loki's Kropkacore, Shang-Chi's Salt and Pepper Squid Rings, Phoenix's Hot Chicken and Egg Oyakadon, and Spider-Man's New York City Cheesecakes. And Jester on an AMA wants to know if I plan on doing any multiplayer games on my channel in 2025. Is that something that interests you? Maybe. I'll have to look. Truck in the background, so forgive me for that. I do have the window open as I wanted a little fresh air to come in. I'm going to have to do a little bit of exploring with StreamYard to see if that's something that I can set up. And as volatile as my connection can be sometimes, I'm a little bit hesitant on trying to do multiplayer games on the channel. But I'll look into that and see what I think of the idea. Like I said, I'll have to look into StreamYard as well. In fact, let me make a note here. Check into StreamYard or other multi-person streaming systems. So I'll take a look into that, and maybe we'll see about doing some multiplayer stuff on the channel. But like I said, I've got to check into a few things first. So with that, let's wrap this video up. So as I mentioned, tomorrow morning is opening day in my 1985 baseball season replay for Season Ticket Baseball. We will be going to Tiger Stadium to open the season, as the Cleveland Indians will be taking on the Detroit Tigers. Burt Blyleven is on the hill for the Indians, and Jack Morris is on the hill for the Tigers. What time and what's the first game of my season ticket replay? We're going to be starting that bright and early, 8:30 a.m. Central Time by the absolute latest is what I'm planning on. And as I mentioned, the first game is going to be the Cleveland Indians at the Detroit Tigers. Burt Blyleven versus Jack Morris. Hopefully, you guys will be there for that. I'm going to be creating the broadcast for that here very shortly. As for what else is coming up, Saturday Mystical Munchies will start out of the Marvel Eat the Universe cookbook with the appetizer, and I just had the list here, Loki's Kropkacore. Sunday, we're going to have the first scenario in the winter campaign for Arkham Horror, the card game. What that scenario will be, we'll know by the time the intro is over on Saturday. Thank you for watching the video. Please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Be sure to turn on notifications so you get my content. Be well, stay safe, take care of yourselves and your loved ones, and I'll be back with more videos in the future. Until then, take care everyone, and Happy New Year to all in case I don't see you again. Once again, take care.